I still remember the exact moment my mother smiled and said, "I have a surprise for your sister." The dining table was decorated like it was someone's birthday. My father sat quietly, pretending to scroll through his phone, but I could see the excitement in his eyes. My younger sister, Alina, was glowing with anticipation. And then my mom dropped the bomb. "I've decided to gift Alina your apartment," she announced, sliding a folder across the table. For a few seconds, I thought I had misheard her. My apartment, the one I bought with my own money, the one I worked 80-hour weeks for, the one I barely slept in because I was busy building my career. Alina gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Really? You're serious?" "Yes," Mom said proudly. "It's the least we can do for you. You deserve stability. Your sister is doing fine anyway." I sat there in silence. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. I wasn't shocked that my mother favored Alina. That had been obvious since childhood. Alina was the delicate one, the emotional one, the one who needed more support. I was the strong one, the responsible one, the one who was told, "You'll manage." But this was different. They had transferred the apartment deed to my mother's name years ago when I was still naive enough to trust them. Back then, I thought it was just for tax purposes. I didn't question it. I was young, ambitious, and focused on growing my business. And my business grew. What my family never truly understood was what I had been building behind the scenes. While they saw me as the overworked daughter who rarely attended family dinners, I was quietly acquiring assets. Quietly investing. Quietly expanding. Including that building. Yes, that building. The very building where my apartment was located. When my mother finished her speech, she looked at me, expecting gratitude. Or maybe silence. Silence was what I usually gave them. "Well," she asked, "say something." I folded my hands calmly. "That's generous of you." Alina squealed and hugged Mom. "Thank you. This changes everything. Now Jason and I can finally move out of his tiny studio." Of course, there was a boyfriend involved. There was always a boyfriend involved. Dad cleared his throat. "It's only fair. You've always been independent. You don't need help like she does." There it was again. "You don't need help." I smiled slightly. Of course. But inside, something shifted. They thought they were taking something from me. What they didn't know was that the apartment they were gifting, it was just one unit in a building that legally belonged to me. 3 years ago, I had quietly purchased the entire property through my company. I never told them. Why would I? They never asked about my work beyond, "Are you still busy?" They never cared about the details. The previous owner had been ready to sell. I saw potential. The location was perfect. I bought all 12 units under my LLC and kept my residency in one of them. Yes, the same unit my mother believed she owned. I let them celebrate that night. I let Alina talk about paint colors and renovations. I let my mother bask in her generosity. But I also made a phone call the next morning. "Prepare the updated lease agreements," I told my property manager. "All units." He paused. "Including yours. Especially mine." 2 weeks later, Alina moved in with Jason. She posted pictures online captioned, "New beginnings." So grateful to my amazing mom. I double-tapped the post. 3 days after that, an official envelope arrived at the apartment. Addressed to Alina. She called me immediately. "Did you know about this?" she demanded. "Know about what?" "It says we need to sign a lease agreement. It says rent is due on the 1st of every month. Is this a mistake?" "No," I replied, calmly. "That's standard policy for the building. But Mom gave me this apartment." "She gave you the unit," I said carefully. "Not the building." Silence. "What are you talking about?" "I own the building." Another silence. Longer this time. "You're joking." "I'm not." She hung up. An hour later, my mother called. Furious. "What is this nonsense about rent?" she snapped. "How dare you humiliate your sister like this?" "I'm not humiliating anyone," I said evenly. "Every resident in that building pays rent. Including family. You can't charge your own sister." "I can," I replied. "Because I own the property." She scoffed. "Don't be ridiculous. That building belongs to Mr. Henderson." "It used to." The line went quiet. "When?" she asked slowly. 3 years ago." I could practically hear her recalculating every conversation we'd had since then. Every dismissive comment about my work. Every time she told relatives, she just works in some corporate job. "This is revenge," she said finally. "No," I said, "this is business." And it was. I didn't raise the rent. I didn't treat Alina differently. I offered her the same lease terms as everyone else. Fair market rate, maintenance included, parking optional. But my family wasn't upset about the money. They were upset about the power shift. For years, they believed I was simply surviving. They never realized I was thriving. Dad tried a different approach. He came over one evening, sitting awkwardly in my living room. "You should have told us," he said quietly. "Would it have mattered?" He hesitated. That hesitation was my answer. "It's not about the building," he said. "It's about respect." I almost laughed. "Respect," I repeated. "You transferred my apartment without asking me. That was different." "How?" He had no response. Meanwhile, Alina and Jason struggled with the idea of paying rent. They assumed they could live there for free. They assumed generosity flowed only one way, toward her. Eventually, she signed the lease. The first month's rent was late. I issued a polite reminder. The second month was late too. This time, I added a late fee. The same fee every tenant faced. My phone exploded that night. "You're choosing money over family," Mom yelled. "No," I corrected her. "I'm choosing boundaries." And that's what this was really about. Boundaries. For years, I allowed them to define me as the capable one who didn't need acknowledgement. The successful one whose achievements were minimized. The daughter whose sacrifices were invisible. Buying that building wasn't about proving anything. It was about security, vision, strategy. But enforcing those lease terms, that was about self-respect. 3 months in, Alina finally understood. She started paying on time. She even asked about upgrading to a larger unit when her freelance career improved. This time, she asked properly. "Would you consider giving me a discount?" She said carefully. I appreciated the tone shift. "I can give you a family referral rate," I replied. 5%. Her eyes widened. "Really?" "Yes, but it's still a contract." She nodded. For the first time in our lives, we were interacting as adults. Mom, however, never fully recovered from the revelation. At family gatherings, she introduced me differently now. "This is my daughter," she'd say. "She owns property." Not with pride, with caution, as if I were something unfamiliar. Maybe I was, because the version of me they knew would have handed over the apartment quietly. Would have absorbed the loss, would have worked harder to compensate. But growth changes people, success changes dynamics, and sometimes, the greatest shock isn't discovering someone owns a building. It's discovering the quiet, overlooked daughter was never small. She was just strategic. In the end, I didn't lose my apartment. I didn't lose my building. And surprisingly, I didn't lose my family either. What I lost was the role they assigned me. And that was worth everything. 3 months after the lease was signed, something shifted in the building, and in my family. Alina had finally started paying rent on time. Not because Mom forced her. Not because Dad intervened. But because reality had settled in. Bills didn't disappear just because you were someone's favorite. Jason, however, was another story. He wasn't used to structure. He wasn't used to contracts. And he definitely wasn't used to the idea that his girlfriend's older sister was technically his landlord. One evening, my property manager called me. "There's a complaint from Unit 4B, he said. "That's Alina," I replied. "Yes, apparently, her boyfriend has been parking in other tenants' assigned spaces." I closed my eyes briefly. "Has he been warned?" "Twice." "Send a written notice," I said calmly. Standard procedure. That same night, my phone lit up. "Alina, did you seriously send us a parking violation notice?" Me. "Yes, it's part of the lease." Alina. "It was just for a few hours." Me. "It's still a violation." 5 minutes later, Mom called. "You're micromanaging them now," she demanded. "I'm enforcing building policy. It's your sister. It's my property." There was that silence again, the kind that happens when someone realizes the emotional leverage they once held no longer works. But what my family didn't know was that the building wasn't just an investment anymore. It was about to become something much bigger. For the past year, I'd been negotiating a redevelopment proposal. The neighborhood was growing fast. New cafes, tech offices, boutique gyms. Property values were climbing every quarter. A real estate group had approached me with an offer. Renovate the building into luxury units, add rooftop amenities, increase market value by almost 40%. It was tempting, but redevelopment meant temporary relocation for tenants, including Alina. I scheduled a meeting with the investors. The numbers were strong. The projections were solid. If I approved the plan, the building's value would nearly double in 5 years. It was the kind of move that separated small landlords from serious developers. That night, I sat in my apartment, technically Unit 3A, and thought about everything that had happened. 3 years ago, I bought the building quietly, afraid of attracting attention. Now, I was sitting on a portfolio that was about to expand. The next family dinner was interesting. Mom had invited relatives over. As usual, conversations revolved around Alina's creative journey and Jason's future plans. No one asked about my work. Until my aunt casually mentioned, "I heard property prices are exploding in your area." I nodded. "They are." Mom chimed in, "Well, she owns that building now." The room went quiet. My uncle leaned forward. "The whole building?" "Yes," I said simply. Questions started flying. "How many units? How long have you had it? Are you planning to buy more?" For the first time, my success wasn't invisible. Mom looked uncomfortable. Alina looked thoughtful. Dad looked impressed. After dinner, Alina pulled me aside. "Are you planning something with the building?" she asked. "Why?" "I overheard you talking about renovation." I studied her face. She wasn't defensive. She wasn't entitled. She was curious. "Yes," I admitted. "There's a proposal." Her expression tightened. "Would we have to move?" "Temporarily. If it goes through." She swallowed. "That would be hard." "I know." For a moment, we stood there not as rivals, not as opposites, but as two adults navigating consequences. "I don't want you to think I expect special treatment," she said quietly. That surprised me. "I don't," I replied. And I meant it. The next week, I called a tenants meeting in the building's small common room. All 12 units attended. I presented the redevelopment plan transparently. Timeline, relocation assistance, projected improvements, compensation options. There were concerns. Of course there were. But there was also understanding. When you treat people fairly, they respond differently. Alina didn't speak during the meeting. She just listened. Later that night, she knocked on my door. "I've been thinking," she said. "If you go through with it, could I help? Maybe with design ideas. I've been building my portfolio." I blinked. "Interior design?" I asked. She nodded. "Small projects. Nothing major. But I'm learning." For years, I saw her as the sheltered one. The dependent one. But maybe she had felt the same about me, the distant one. The unapproachable one. "I'll review your work," I said. "If it fits the concept, we can collaborate." Her smile wasn't childish. It was earned. A month later, the contracts were signed. Renovation was officially happening. Tenants were given relocation stipends. Temporary units were arranged in a nearby building I also owned, something my family hadn't known about either. Yes, there was another building, smaller, 8 units. When Dad found out, he stared at me like he was meeting a stranger. "How many properties do you own?" he asked. "Enough." He shook his head slowly. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" I thought about that. Because every time I tried to share good news in the past, it was overshadowed by Alina's needs. Because every achievement of mine was labeled as expected. Because being strong meant being unnoticed. "I guess I stopped expecting interest," I said honestly. That answer seemed to hit him harder than any financial figure. Renovations began in spring. Walls came down. Wiring was replaced. Plumbing upgraded. The rooftop was redesigned into a shared terrace with greenery and seating areas. Alina submitted 3 design concepts for the model unit. 2 were average. 1 was exceptional. Clean lines. Warm textures. Smart use of space. Professional. I approved it. When the first renovated unit was completed, I invited the family for a walkthrough. Mom walked in and gasped. "This is your building," she whispered. "Yes." Alina stood in the living room, looking around at the finished design, her design, executed perfectly. Jason, surprisingly, looked humbled. "I didn't realize how much work this takes," he admitted. "It's more than collecting rent," I said. "It was budgets, risk assessments, contractor negotiations, legal compliance, market forecasting. It was leadership." Over the next 6 months, something unexpected happened. My relationship with Alina evolved. We started having coffee, not as sisters competing for validation, but as collaborators discussing flooring samples and lighting fixtures. She began paying rent early. She stopped calling Mom to complain about policies. And Mom struggled. The dynamic she relied on, protector and protected, was dissolving. One evening, she came to my place alone. "I think I underestimated you," she said quietly. I didn't respond immediately. "You never needed us the way she did," she continued. "I thought that meant you were fine." "I wasn't fine," I said gently. "I was just capable." She nodded slowly, absorbing that difference. When the renovation was complete, the building's value had increased beyond projections. Luxury tenants signed leases within weeks. The rooftop terrace became the building's signature feature. And Alina, I offered her a formal contract as a junior design consultant for future projects. Paid, professional, earned. She cried when she signed it. Not because she needed saving, but because she felt seen. The irony wasn't lost on me. Mom once gifted her my apartment to secure her future. In the end, it was the building, and the boundaries, that secured both of ours. Our family dinners changed after that. There was less comparison, less quiet competition, less assumption. Dad started asking about market trends. Mom started asking about timelines. Alina started talking about client meetings. In me, I stopped shrinking. Owning the building was never about proving I was better. It was about proving, mostly to myself, that I didn't have to accept roles written for me. The overlooked daughter. The strong one. The self-sufficient one. Strength doesn't mean silent. Independence doesn't mean invisible. Success doesn't mean selfish. The day the final renovation payment cleared, I stood on the rooftop terrace at sunset. The city glowed beneath me. 12 units. 1 building. 2 sisters. A family recalibrated. Mom once believed she had the power to give away my home. She didn't know I owned the foundation beneath it. And now, we all understood something important. You can underestimate a person for years. But the truth has a way of rising, brick by brick, until it stands too tall to ignore.